Welcome to the deep dive. We take your sources, plunge right in, and try to unearth some surprising nuggets of knowledge. Today we're doing a deep dive into a creature that's, well, it's cloaked in mystery, and also a very distinct aroma. We're talking about the Florida skunk ape. It's a kind of Bigfoot-like cryptid, that term for an animal whose existence isn't proven, and it's supposed to haunt the steamy, alligator-filled swamps down in Florida. It's a legend that's really grabbed people's curiosity, and we've got some interesting sources to dig into here.
Right. And our mission today really is to look hard at those sources. Can this creature actually have hidden itself from us all this time? We want to separate the facts from the folklore and maybe most importantly, figure out how long this legend has really been around. It might be shorter than you think. By the end, you should have a pretty solid handle on this elusive topic.
Okay, so when we think about Bigfoot-type creatures, what makes this one, the skunk ape, stand out? Like, beyond just the ape-man thing?
Well, it's right there in the name, isn't it? The Florida skunk ape. It's known uniquely for being the absolute stinkiest.
Right, the smell.
Exactly. That alleged odor is its calling card, Makes it different from Sasquatch up in the Pacific Northwest, for example.
And thinking about where it supposedly lives, that kind of makes sense, maybe? The swamplands of southern Florida, that terrain is just incredibly difficult to get through.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking countless twisting miles of waterways, teeming with alligators, dense mangroves, tangled cypress roots.
Yeah.
It's a place where even someone really determined would struggle, to find a clear path. So if there's a place for a big, elusive animal to hide out and hardly ever be seen, well, Florida swamplands are a pretty good candidate.
You'd need a huge effort to search it properly.
A massive effort, dedicated teams, lots of equipment, probably a ton of mosquito repellent, just to cover a tiny fraction.
Okay, so as we were digging into the origins, this common idea came up that the skunk ape legend goes back centuries, but our sources pointed somewhere else entirely.
That's right. It's a bit of a misconception. The Florida skunk ape, as like a named thing, really made its debut in August 1971.
Just 1971?
Yep, through an Associated Press story that went out nationwide. And the report came from this guy, H.C. Osborne, people called him Buzz. He was an electrical engineer, but also an amateur archaeologist.
And his story was pretty compelling, wasn't it? He and some friends were out digging for artifacts in the big cypress swamp.
Yeah, deep in the swamp. About 3 a.m, they hear something outside their tent.
What did he say happened?
Osmond said, we went out, and there it was, just standing there looking at us while we stared at it. But then it didn't stay very long and ran before we could recover from our surprise.
And the tracks.
The next morning, they found tracks, described them as very man-like. They even made plaster casts.
How big were they?
Huge. 17.5 inches long and 11.5 inches wide at the toes. And Osmond said on later trips, they found smaller tracks too, which made him think there were maybe at least 3 of them, maybe a family unit. He even started guessing about what they ate, where they lived, and he really hoped to capture or photograph one.
Okay, so that 71 story from Buzz Osborne, that really kicks off the modern legend, but it makes you wonder, if it's so notorious now, why aren't there clear stories from before 71? Osborne himself apparently said he'd heard that trappers and fishermen knew about it way back in the 1920s.
And that's the key question, right? If people knew about it, where's the proof? Our deep dive came up completely empty on that. Like 0 printed stories, no documents, nothing to back up any kind of widespread knowledge before Osmond's account. It's just a blank.
Now, I did stumble across one weird headline from 1926 that mentioned the swamp ape. It sounds like it predates 71, right?
It does sound like it, but you have to look closer. That 26 story, it talks about a swamp ape. Yeah, but it's describing finding monkey bones. It's paleontology, not a sighting of a living creature.
Okay. Fossil bones.
Right. And what's really telling is how many mistakes are in that short news clip. It gets basic facts wrong, like saying the Seminoles weren't the first tribe in Florida. It messes up the name of the Smithsonian Institution.
Oh, dear.
And it claims these monkey bones proved some kind of prior swamp ape tribe existed. But, well, we have no evidence that non-human primates ever lived naturally in Florida, discounting, modern zoo escapes or pets.
So that 1926 story was likely.
Probably satire, or more likely, yellow journalism. That sensationalized, sometimes made-up reporting style was super common back then. It definitely wasn't a genuine cryptid report.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the established cryptozoology books, the big reference works? Do they mention earlier sightings?
Good question. We looked at cryptozoology A to Z from 99, pretty comprehensive, and it only starts mentioning skunk ape sightings in the 1970s.
Nothing before Osborne.
Nope. And even more significant, Bernard Heuvelmann's huge 1958 book, On the Track of Unknown Animals. I mean, this is like the Bible for primate cryptids. It covers the Americas thoroughly. No mention of a Florida. It seems that way. It points to a pattern you sometimes see in, well, fields like cryptozoology. An author asserts these early cases, maybe without solid primary source evidence, and then their book becomes the reference for the next author.
Ah, like a feedback loop.
Exactly. And suddenly you have a history built on potentially shaky ground. It really shows why checking those original sources is so crucial.
That really clears things up. Okay, what about the Native American legend angle? That often comes up with cryptids. I've seen Newton connect these seminal words, Estikapkaki, supposedly meaning tall man, to the skunk ape. Adds a layer of ancient mystery, doesn't it?
It certainly does add mystique, but it's another big red flag.
How so?
Those words, Estikapkaki, they only seem to appear in cryptozoology books. You don't find them in actual Seminole language resources or texts. Someone even checked with a Seminole language group online. Nobody recognized the words.
So, likely made up.
It seems highly probable, and unfortunately it's a tactic used sometimes. Fabricating native legends gives a claim a kind of persuasive power, that nativist credibility, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what's really striking, go back to Buzz Osborne himself in that original 71 interview. He actually said, and I quote, "I haven't heard any Indian legends about it, but I bet we'll find some when we start talking to the Indians."
Wow. So he basically predicted it would happen.
Yeah. It shows this early awareness that attaching native legends had like a marketing value for the story, almost like setting up a self-fulfilling prophecy for the legend to grow.
That's quite something. Okay, so the early accounts seem shaky at best, but the skunk ape definitely took off after 1971. And the biggest boost probably came much later, right? In 2001.
Absolutely. That's when things got really interesting visually. An anonymous letter, along with 2 photographs, was sent to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department.
And the letter described?
It speculated the creature might be an escaped orangutan, described it as huge, like 6.5 to 7 feet tall, even when it was in a kneeling position, mentioned an awful smell. This is the skunk part again, and deep whoop noises.
And the photos themselves, they're famous online now, the Miyaka skunk ape photos.
That's them. They show this dark gray kind of ape-like figure lit up by a camera flash at night. It's partly hidden by palm fronds.
But looking closely, I said earlier, it doesn't really look like an orangutan or any known ape, right? What are the specific problems?
Yeah, there are at least 3 big inconsistencies with known great apes. First, the color. It's mostly black or dark gray, but it has this really distinct gray fur just on its chin and upper chest. That pattern, never seen on any known ape.
Okay, what else?
Second, the fangs. You can see lower fangs, and they look really long, straight, and thin, almost fragile. Apes that have prominent lower fangs, like gorillas, have thick, strong, triangular ones. These look different.
And the third thing?
Eye shine. You can clearly see its eyes reflecting the flash, like a cat or a deer.
But apes don't have that.
Nope. No monkeys or apes have that reflective layer, the tapetum lucidum behind the retina. Only some much smaller primates, way off on a different branch of the evolutionary tree, have it.
Okay, so the photos are definitely weird. And since there are 2 photos showing it move slightly, it's a real 3D object, not just a flat cutout or something.
All right. It's an articulated, 3-dimensional something.
So what could it be? What are the possibilities?
Well, it could be a real animal, but one that's remarkably inconsistent with known biology. Seems unlikely, given those features. Could be someone in a costume, a very custom-made one, though, because nobody's ever found a commercially available suit that matches.
Or maybe a prop, a model.
That's another possibility, yeah.
Right.
Some kind of convincing model. What is interesting is that a local cryptozoologist, David Barkasy, actually managed to trace the film processing numbers.
Oh, yeah. What did he find?
He confirmed they were taken in the fall of 2000, and the film was processed that December, right there in Sarasota. That's the same month the letter and photos were sent to the sheriff.
So if it was a hoax,
Yeah.
it was a local job.
Exactly. A locally perpetrated hoax, if that's what it was.
And man, if it was a hoax, it's got to be one of the most successful ever, right? Still talked about, shared online almost a quarter century later.
Absolutely. A very rewarding hoax, you could say. But if it's genuine,
Then what?
Well, then you have to accept a creature that's apparently not afraid of humans, stands maybe 2 meters tall even when kneeling, makes whoop noises, and yet somehow managed to completely escape all notice before 1971, avoid every camera except this one time, and leave absolutely no trace in the fossil record.
That's a lot to swallow.
It's a pretty extraordinary set of circumstances to accept. How convincing you find that possibility, well, that's really up to you.
So bringing it all together then,
Yeah.
looking at all the sources we've dug into today, what's the final word from this deep dive on the Florida skunk ape?
Well, based purely on the sources we've examined, the conclusion has to be that the existence or even the basic plausibility of the Florida skunk ape, it really hasn't been convincingly established. We kind of operate with what scientists call the null hypothesis, right? Meaning basically our default position is that extraordinary claims like a huge undiscovered animal living in Florida swamps aren't true until there's really compelling evidence to make us change our minds.
And we haven't seen that compelling evidence here.
Not in these sources, no. What this deep dive really shows, I think, isn't just the story of a weird cryptid. It's also about how information anecdotes, maybe mistakes, maybe even deliberate hoaxes can build on each other to shape a legend, sometimes creating this whole narrative in books and online that maybe didn't have much basis in reality to begin with.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It definitely makes you think, doesn't it? When we hear these extraordinary claims, what kind of proof should we, as just curious people, really be looking for before we're convinced?
Exactly. What's the standard of evidence?
Well, something to ponder. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into all the knowledge that's out there. What stands out to you from our deep dive into the skunk ape today?